process of liberty, to my mind, is this idea of getting rid of power, getting it to smaller and smaller jurisdictions, and ideally trying to get it down to the level of the individual. I don't know how many people we'll have running. You know, we've had about 150 people apply to be candidates. Some of them have fallen away. Some of them can't meet the requirements, and so we're working hard to get all our candidates registered with Elections Canada. But it's not an easy process. You know, you have to come up with $1,000, and 100 signatures doesn't sound like much, but it's tough when you're out there by yourself and you're slogging it and you don't have a big party with a lot of supporters and volunteers behind you. I mean, none of the candidates for the CPC or the Liberals go out on their own and collect signatures, but all our candidates do, you know, and that's one of the things of being a small party. We just have to go out there and do a lot more things on your own. Like I said earlier, I was out till 4 a.m. Last night banging in signs and getting them up. You know, I don't think any of these guys were doing that. I don't think Tommy Mulcair or JT or Steve have banged in any signs this election. But you know, one day we can only hope that we'll have that many supporters and that many volunteers that I can fly around and go to debates and raise hell in front of a larger audience. But I appreciate you folks being here with me tonight. Wow, yeah. Oh, they're going to close tax loopholes. You know, our tax policy is we're pushing for a flat tax, 15%, a 4-click return. So we're offering up exemptions. You know, we're raising the basic personal exemption to $17,300. We're creating additional exemptions for students, seniors, children, families with children. And so, you know, a family of 4 with 2 kids under 18 wouldn't have to pay taxes on the first, I think it's about $43,000 worth of income that's coming into that family, which is pretty substantial. And of course, you know, we want to get taxation down as low as possible. We think that's a step that could be achieved in one term of government. You know, obviously we can't get down to you know, to the minimal tax rate we'd like to in one term, but we can get down to 15%. And could you imagine doing a 4-click tax return? Literally, type in how much you earned. Student, child, senior? No. Okay, you're done. I mean, we accountants would be out of jobs. The CRA, we'd have to cut them into you know, about a quarter of what they are today. I mean, it would drastically reduce overhead. I mean, just think about how much time and energy is taken up in preparing tax returns for businesses and individuals. It's a huge time-consuming thing, and that time, you know, economists would call an opportunity cost. That's time that could be taken to be productive. That's time that could be taken going to a ball game with your kid. That's time that could be taken, you know, spending family time, or it's time that could be taken getting more customers and selling more product. So just getting rid of that bureaucratic overhead would solve a lot of problems. With the percentage of the vote, we may see a surge. I mean, I don't know. I never know how these things are going to go. I mean, yeah, we're putting up a good fight in my district. We're sinking some money and resources into my district, and we're going to run a respectable campaign. You know, we've got big signs out, just like the CPC and the Liberals do. We've got supporters of the previous Conservative candidate jumping on board with us. And so, you know, we may get a respectable vote count there. Even if we get 5 or 10%, that would be huge. That would be a huge, you know, it would suddenly give our party a little bit more credibility. If we ruined the day of one of the candidates there because of the votes we got, well, we'd become a political force to be reckoned. People would recognize that, and we'd attract a lot of attention. So, you know, that's the hope. We're going to run a really strong campaign and hope that we get a lot of votes. We're not going to win a seat, I doubt, but we're going to try real hard to. And stranger things have happened. So now they're on to the migrant crisis and refugees and immigration. I have mixed feelings about immigration right now because we have such a large government, and there's such a risk of the welfare state being taken over. I worry about having a huge influx of immigrants that don't have the values that well, I was going to say that Canadians have, but increasingly Canadians aren't showing that they really have the Enlightenment values that built this country. But regardless, I mean, these people often come from countries that don't respect women's rights, that have huge human rights atrocities, that just don't respect property and liberty the way we do culturally. So having a huge influx can be a problem. But also, libertarians generally favor open borders because, well, first of all, it's an imaginary line, and people shouldn't have the right to say who crosses that imaginary line. But the fact of the matter is, we do have countries, we do have those lines, and there are huge ramifications for people crossing them. So the policy that I favor currently, and some of my colleagues differ with me, some are far more open borders than I am, and they're free to advocate for that. I'm certainly not dogmatic on this, but the policy that I favor is one of private sponsorship. So if a refugee or immigrant wants to come over, a family or an individual or private charity can sponsor that individual and take on the financial burden themselves, and also the cultural integration into a liberal democracy burden. So we can hold Canadian citizens who bring over and sponsor immigrants accountable then for their cultural integration. And if they turn into bad guys who go off on rampages or something like that, we have an individual who's accountable, who's a Canadian citizen who we can take to account. This idea of we need a certain quota of people, there's no principle to that. I don't think there's a certain number of people we need to accept in or refuse, but that's my take. Stand on face covering at time of citizenship. That's a good question. Look, I look at it like this. I think that, of course, someone needs to be identified when they take an oath, and in order to be identified, for sure. Does it need to be done publicly in front of a crowd? I don't think so. I haven't heard a compelling argument of why that needs to happen. For example, the one thing I think about is my grandmother, who was Mennonite by background. She wore a head covering. To her, that was her idea of being modest. I think it's kind of silly. I don't understand it. We're in a liberal democracy. Why do you have to cover your head? It's so backwards. It's maybe patriarchal or whatever. But she wanted to do it. To her, it was her modesty to cover her head. And so whether I agreed with it or not, or thought it was silly or not, I would have fought for her right to wear that head covering, even if someone said, listen, you have to take that off as a sign of respect in this forum, or you need to take it off as a sign of respect and show people your hair so that we can see that, there's whatever, right? And so I kind of look at face coverings in the same way. It's covering a face, covering a body part. From what I understand, I know there's an argument to be made that they're being forced to do it, but women I've talked to that wear the hijab and stuff like that say they're doing it because it's their modesty. It makes them feel more like a woman. And I'm a libertarian. I don't want to impose on them. So, I think that you should have to show your face to be identified when it's appropriate to officials and to take an oath, but I'm not sure that you should have to remove it in front of a crowd when you feel like you're completely naked by doing so. I think that's kind of a little bit degrading to me, but... All right, let's see what we got here. So now they're comparing stats. Should the Canadian government do anything about the immigration of Syrian and Libyan refugees? Well, generally, we don't favor a positivistic policy. So in other words, we don't favor sending government humanitarian aid around overseas. I mean, I would probably favor that over, most military interventions. But the point is, I would favor no foreign aid, no humanitarian things at all. I would leave that to private individuals. I would open the door to private individuals to be as charitable and helpful as they want by allowing them to keep more of their money, allowing them to sponsor immigrants and removing the bureaucratic barriers for them to do that, and say, look, we'll just hold you accountable. You can spend as much money bringing people over as you want. You're accountable for them. We're going to hold you accountable for them, and that's the approach that I would take. So, you know, I don't think there's a certain. I mean, you can make the argument about what are you going to do about Mexican cartels, or what are you going to do about North Korea, or what about people in the Ukraine, or this part of the world, or that part of the world. I mean, there are conflicts and problems everywhere, and if you take it as a principle that we need to help these people, well, then suddenly, you know, we're helping the whole world. And listen, that's up to the individuals and up to charities and up to private organizations to do. The government is simply there, and its only purpose is to protect Canadians, to protect the individual. That's all that money should ever be spent on. That's all that government should ever do, is protect people that are Canadian citizens. It shouldn't be, you know, intervening in all these other things.
Too busy for jobs.
Yeah, we favor abolishing the TPP because it's another government program, and one of the problems with the TPP is that it creates a second class of citizen that first of all Canadians can't compete with. I mean, they're essentially indentured servants, aren't they? So they come over here. I heard a story about a temporary foreign worker who came to Nanaimo to work at a mall kiosk. He had to, a condition of his employment was that he had to stay with his employer, who charged him room and board, and who also fined him every time he looked at his phone or did something he didn't like at work, to the point where the guy made $0 at the end of the month. So he had room and board, but he made zero paycheck. Now this guy had two choices. He either put up with it or get deported back to his hellhole of a country. Now, how do you compete with an indentured servant like that who makes $0? That's not fair to Canadians, and it's not fair to that guy. So, you know, we favor, like, this guy should have been able to, if he was able to come over here, we value, you know, we would be in favor of a more streamlined pathway to citizenship, or a work visa or something like that, that allowed the person to, you know, go to another job if it wasn't right. Their wages would then come up, and, you know, these employers wouldn't be able to hire slaves anymore, essentially, and the Canadians would be able to compete with them on the job market. So we value, we favor getting rid of the program like the TPP. They're talking a lot about the refugee policy here. Housing. What about housing, Max? Yeah, corporate-controlled trade does not equal free trade. That's right. Yeah, and right now we have a number of concerning things. Oh, you know what? You guys were talking about the TPP, and I thought you were talking about the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, the TFW. Sorry about that. The TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. Yes, we value. Yeah, I mean, listen, this is nothing more than managed trade, right? This is giving globalist corporations plain favorites, and from what we've seen so far, and you know, I would need to see more of the agreement to comment, but that's one of the concerning things about the TPPs. It's being done behind closed doors. You know, for all we know, they're trading away Canadian sovereignty, and we know from leaked documents that there's a lot of intellectual property rights that are going to be getting stiffer and implemented, and this isn't good. I mean, intellectual property rights tell you what you can or can't do with your own material property, and that's going to drastically affect businesses and Canadian lives. And these rights are being, you know, negotiated away in closed door meetings. And that's just a small part of it. So anytime you see a document that's hundreds and thousands of pages long that deals with trade, you should have immediate red flags, because, you know, it should be about 1 or 2 sentences long. Remove any barriers to free trade, get rid of tariffs, you know, let me buy from whomever, wherever I want, and let me trade with them. That's free trade. But 700 pages to say that, you got to have some red flags.